7 soldiers from Korean, Vietnam Wars receive Medals of Honor. At an emotional White House ceremony, President Joe Biden bestowed the nation's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor, on 7 extraordinary soldiers who demonstrated unparalleled bravery during the Korean and Vietnam Wars. The ceremony paid tribute to Private Bruno R. Orig, PFC, Wataru Nakamura, Corporal Fred B. McGee, Private First Class Charles R. Johnson, and General Richard E. Cavazos, all Korean War veterans honored posthumously for their heroic service. Their families stood proudly in their stead to accept the medals, preserving the legacy of their courage. From the Vietnam War, Captain Hugh R. Nelson Jr. was also honored posthumously, while Private First Class Kenneth J. David, the sole living recipient among the group, accepted his medal in person, receiving heartfelt applause for his valor and dedication. I am profoundly humbled to recognize 7 true American heroes today, President Biden said. And let me be clear, this is no exaggeration. These men exemplify what it means to be a hero. From different generations, ranks, and walks of life, they share a common thread, a willingness to go above and beyond the call of duty. They embody the very essence of courage, sacrifice, and devotion that this medal represents. Each of them has earned a place of honor in our nation's history. At a heartfelt White House ceremony, President Joe Biden awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration, to 7 remarkable soldiers who displayed extraordinary valor during the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Among these heroes, one soldier, Private Kenneth J. David, is alive and stood proudly to accept his medal in person. The ceremony honored Private Bruno R. Orig, PFC, Wataru Nakamura, Corporal Fred B. McGee, Private First Class Charles R. Johnson, and General Richard E. Cavazos, all of whom served heroically in the Korean War. While their families accepted the medals posthumously, their acts of bravery left an indelible mark on history. Private Bruno R. Orig. Private Bruno R. Orig, born in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1930, was a shining example of courage. On February 15, 1951, near Cheopyeong-ni, Korea, Orig returned from a mission to find his comrades severely wounded amid relentless enemy fire. Risking his own life, he administered first aid and helped evacuate the injured to safety. When a machine gun crew was incapacitated, Orig volunteered to man the weapon, enabling a friendly platoon to withdraw without casualties. He fought valiantly until his position was overrun, and when the ground was later recaptured, Orig was found lifeless beside his weapon, surrounded by fallen enemies. He was just 20 years old. Bruno saw his fellow soldiers were wounded and stranded under enemy fire, Biden remarked. Without hesitation, he ran out to rescue them, giving his own life to save the lives of his brothers in arms. That's valor. That's the definition of valor. From the Vietnam War, Captain Hugh R. Nelson Jr. and Private Kenneth J. David were also recognized for their heroism. While Captain Nelson was honored posthumously, Private David, the sole living recipient among the 7, humbly received his medal to a standing ovation. His survival is a living testament to the sacrifices and courage of this distinguished group. I am deeply privileged to honor these 7 American heroes today, President Biden said. These men, from different walks of life and generations, share an unwavering commitment to duty and a willingness to go above and beyond. They are heroes in every sense of the word, men who have earned their place among the most honored in our nation's history. Private First Class Wataru Nakamura. Private First Class Wataru Nakamura's story is one of unparalleled bravery and sacrifice. Born in Los Angeles, California in 1921, his life took a sharp turn after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Like many Japanese Americans, Nakamura faced the injustice of internment camps. Yet, despite this adversity, he chose to serve the very nation that had wronged him, fighting in both World War II and the Korean War. President Biden recounted his heroism. After Pearl Harbor, he was forced to live in an internment camp, like so many other Japanese Americans. But still, He signed up to serve our nation during World War II and the Korean War. During his last mission in May of 1951, single-handedly, he defended his unit from an enemy attack, fighting valiantly until he was killed by a grenade. On May 18, 1951, Nakamura, serving with Company 1, 38th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division, in Pungcheon-ni, Korea, volunteered for a perilous mission to repair a communications line between his platoon and the command post. Amid the mission, he encountered enemy forces that had encircled friendly positions and were on the brink of breaking through the company's defenses. Acting without hesitation, Nakamura charged the enemy with his bayonet fixed. He single-handedly took down a hostile machine gun nest, reclaiming key bunkers and driving the enemy back. When his ammunition ran out, he retreated under heavy fire, regrouped, and joined an ammunition party climbing the hill. After briefing the officer in charge, he rearmed and, with cover from 2 fellow soldiers, launched a counterattack. Nakamura's courage was relentless. He neutralized 3 enemies in one bunker and subdued more in another. In his final act of heroism, he pressed forward against the remaining enemy positions. But during this valiant assault, he was struck down by an enemy grenade. Private First Class Wataru Nakamura gave his life for his comrades and his country at the age of 29. His extraordinary courage, selflessness, and determination remain a lasting testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable odds. Corporal Fred B. McGee. Corporal Fred B. McGee's story is one of unyielding courage, selflessness, and dedication. Born in Steubenville, Ohio, in 1930, McGee grew up in the heart of the Midwest, working in the steel industry before enlisting in the Army in 1951. He was deployed to Korea in January 1952, serving in one of the first integrated Army units of the Korean War, a testament to the changing face of the US military and the nation it defended. President Biden honored his legacy, saying, "He was a Midwesterner, a steelworker, and a gunner in one of the first integrated Army units of the Korean War. Fred embodied the very best of our country." In June 1952, his unit was attacked. They took casualties. They were ordered to fall back. But Fred refused to leave until he helped every wounded soldier evacuate. On June 16, 1952, near Tangwan-ni, Korea, McGee was serving as a gunner on a light machine gun in a weapons squad when his unit came under intense enemy fire. Despite relentless machine gun and mortar attacks targeting his exposed position, McGee delivered heavy supporting fire, protecting his platoon and aiding their assault. Forced to move his gun multiple times under fire, he remained steadfast, offering critical covering fire for the assault elements of his platoon. When his squad leader and several other members of his squad were wounded, McGee stepped up, assuming command and moving the squad even closer to the enemy in a bold effort to neutralize a hostile machine gun. After his own machine gunner was fatally injured, McGee took over the gun himself, continuing to direct the fight. Refusing to retreat, he ordered his squad to withdraw while voluntarily staying behind to evacuate the wounded and recover the fallen. Wounded in the face, McGee faced unimaginable danger. In an act of extraordinary bravery, he stood tall amidst heavy enemy fire, attempting to recover the body of the company runner. When forced to abandon the effort, he turned his focus to rescuing a wounded comrade, helping the soldier to safety through a barrage of mortar and artillery fire. McGee was just 22 years old during this harrowing ordeal. After returning home from the Korean War, he continued his life of hard work and resilience, spending more than 4 decades in the steel industry. Corporal Fred B. McGee passed away in 2020 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, leaving behind a legacy of valor and unwavering dedication to his fellow soldiers and his country. Private First Class Charles R. Johnson. Private First Class Charles R. Johnson's life was defined by courage, selflessness, and an unwavering sense of duty. Born in Sharon, Connecticut, in 1932, Johnson was a high school football standout, earning the admiration of his classmates for his strength and determination on the field. In 1952, he traded his jersey for an army uniform, answering the call to serve during the Korean War. President Biden captured his legacy with heartfelt words. Growing up, in the words of Charlie's high school classmates, he was a heck of a football player. Back in 1952, Charlie signed up to serve in Korea, trading his jersey for a uniform. During one battle, he gave his life to defend a bunker full of his wounded soldiers. His valor saved 10 men, including an old high school classmate. On the fateful night of June 11th to 12th, 1953, Johnson, serving as a rifleman with Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, found himself at the heart of a brutal assault by Chinese forces on Outpost Harry. The trenches and bunkers he and his squad defended were under relentless attack. Amid the chaos, Johnson's bravery became a lifeline for his comrades. Wounded first by a direct artillery strike on his bunker and then by a grenade thrown inside, Johnson refused to let his injuries slow him down. Despite his pain, he administered first aid to those more seriously injured and dragged a wounded soldier to safety in a secure bunker. Along the way, he paused to aid others and engaged enemy troops in fierce hand-to-hand combat, demonstrating extraordinary valor. Knowing the dire circumstances they faced, Johnson left the relative safety of the bunker to search for weapons and ammunition, ensuring his comrades were rearmed. Recognizing the overwhelming enemy force, he made the ultimate decision: to stand between his injured comrades and the advancing troops. He promised to hold off the enemy as long as he could, buying his squad precious time to survive. In his final act of heroism, Johnson fought valiantly until he was killed, sacrificing his life to protect the men he had vowed to defend. At just 19 years old, PFC Charles R. Johnson's courage and selflessness left an indelible mark, ensuring that 10 of his comrades, including a former high school classmate, would live to tell his story. His legacy endures as a shining example of heroism and devotion to others. General Richard E. Cavazos. General Richard E. Cavazos' legacy stands as a testament to extraordinary leadership, unwavering courage, and a profound commitment to his men. Born in Kingsville, Texas, in 1929, Cavazos began his military journey through the Reserve Officer Training Corps at Texas Tech University, earning his commission in 1951. His life would become a story of breaking barriers and redefining heroism. President Biden honored him with these words. Richard led his men through a difficult and deadly mission in enemy territory. Eventually, he was ordered to retreat, but he stayed. He stayed, rescuing wounded soldiers one by one until every one of them was evacuated. Richard went on to serve for 3 decades in the Army, becoming the country's first Hispanic 4-star general. The night of June 14, 1953, near Sagumac, Korea, marked the moment when Cavazos' heroism would shine brightest. As a first lieutenant commanding Company E, 2nd Battalion, 65th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, he led his men in a daring raid on an entrenched enemy outpost. Their mission was clear: destroy the enemy personnel and installations. Under a storm of enemy mortar and artillery fire, Cavazos charged forward, guiding his men into the trenches where brutal close combat ensued. He directed heavy fire on the enemy, dismantling their stronghold. When an intense enemy barrage struck his position, Cavazos regrouped his company, withdrew, and launched 2 more assaults through relentless fire. Each time, they destroyed key enemy fortifications and inflicted heavy losses. Ordered to withdraw, Cavazos complied, but refused to leave anyone behind. He remained alone on the battlefield, exposed to enemy fire, to search for his missing men. One by one, he located 5 wounded soldiers and carried them to safety on the reverse slope of a nearby hill where they could be evacuated by friendly forces. But Cavazos' mission wasn't over. Returning to the battlefield, he found a group of separated men and personally led them to safety. When he learned there were still soldiers unaccounted for, he went back again, locating and rescuing another group. Cavazos made 2 more unassisted trips across the deadly battlefield, ensuring no one was left behind. Only after he was certain the battlefield was clear, as dawn broke on June 15th, did he allow his own wounds to be treated. Cavazos' extraordinary valor earned him the Distinguished Service Cross and cemented his place in military history. Rising to the rank of general, he became the first Hispanic four-star general in U.S. history, retiring in 1984 after 3 decades of service. At just 24 years old during his heroic actions in Korea, Cavazos embodied leadership, selflessness, and resilience. He passed away in 2017 in San Antonio, Texas, leaving behind a legacy of inspiration for generations to come. Captain Hugh R. Nelson, Junior Captain Hugh R. Nelson, Jr.'s legacy is one of unparalleled courage and ultimate sacrifice. Born in 1937 in Charlotte, North Carolina, Nelson answered the call of duty and joined the Army in 1963. Just 3 years later, at the age of 28, he performed an act of selflessness and bravery that defined the very essence of heroism. President Biden poignantly honored his sacrifice. He was just 28 years old when he and his crew were shot down in Vietnam. Hugh freed his men who were trapped in the wreckage. Then, as the enemy began to attack, he used his body as a shield to protect them. It cost him dearly. It cost him his life. Hugh's commanding officer called it the ultimate act of self-sacrifice, which it was. On June 5, 1966, near Moc Hoa, Republic of Vietnam, Nelson was serving as the acting aircraft commander of an armed UH-1 Iroquois helicopter with the 114th Aviation Company Airmobile Light. During a perilous search and destroy reconnaissance mission, enemy fire struck the aircraft, rendering it nearly uncontrollable. With remarkable skill and composure, Nelson and the pilot managed to crash land the helicopter despite the severe damage. Emerging from the wreckage, Nelson immediately turned his attention to his wounded comrades. On the far side of the helicopter, he discovered his crew chief, dazed and trapped inside the mangled aircraft. Braving the chaos, Nelson freed the specialist and carried him to safety. But his mission wasn't complete. He climbed back into the shattered helicopter to rescue the door gunner, who was still strapped inside and unable to move. As insurgents opened fire on the downed aircraft, Nelson worked tirelessly under a barrage of bullets. Despite being hit multiple times, he successfully freed the door gunner and carried him from the wreckage. Placing his wounded comrade on the ground, Nelson shielded him with his own body, using himself as a human barrier against the enemy fire. Nelson was struck several more times and ultimately succumbed to his wounds, but his selfless act saved the life of his fellow soldier. Thanks to Nelson's sacrifice, the wounded door gunner was able to deploy a smoke grenade, signaling for reinforcements. The responding aircraft drove back the insurgents and successfully evacuated the 3 surviving crew members, ensuring their survival. At just 28 years old, Captain Hugh R. Nelson, Jr. made the ultimate sacrifice, embodying the highest ideals of service, bravery, and devotion to his comrades. His extraordinary actions continue to inspire and remind us of the profound cost of freedom. Private First Class Kenneth J. David. Private First Class Kenneth J. David's story is a testament to extraordinary bravery, selflessness, and unwavering dedication to his comrades. Born in 1950, David joined the Army in 1969, embarking on a path that would mark him as a true hero. On May 7, 1970, near Fire Support Base Maureen in Thua Thien Province, Vietnam, David was serving as a radio telephone operator with Company D, 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry, 101st Airborne Division. That day, his unit came under an intense and devastating assault from a large and determined enemy force. The initial onslaught claimed the life of the platoon leader and inflicted heavy casualties on the company, leaving the soldiers reeling under the attack. David, however, wasted no time. He handed his radio to his platoon sergeant and charged forward to the defensive perimeter. With unrelenting determination, he unleashed a torrent of automatic weapons fire, refusing to allow the enemy to advance. From this exposed position, David stood as a barrier against the onslaught, defying every attempt by the enemy to overrun his company's defenses. As he fought, David noticed the critical danger faced by the wounded being brought to the center of the perimeter. Driven by a fierce commitment to protect his comrades, he took an even greater risk. He moved beyond the perimeter, closer to the enemy, while continuing to fire relentlessly. Each time the enemy directed their fire toward the wounded, David would leap from his position, shouting to draw their focus back to him. Despite the concentrated enemy fire now targeting him, David stood his ground. Even as a satchel charge exploded near him, wounding him and depleting his ammunition, he refused to retreat. Instead, he hurled hand grenades toward the attackers, holding them at bay and keeping the pressure off his injured comrades. When the unit's medic reached him to provide aid, David dismissed the offer, assuring the medic he was fine. In reality, he was far from unscathed, but his focus remained singular, protecting his fellow soldiers. His actions created a critical window for incoming medevac helicopters to safely evacuate the wounded, ensuring their survival. As reinforcements fought their way to the embattled company, David's resilience did not waver. He carried a wounded comrade to safety, then returned to the front line to provide covering fire, ensuring the wounded could be evacuated. Only after the enemy broke contact and fled did David allow himself to be evacuated for his injuries. Kenneth J. David's actions on that fateful day embody the highest ideals of courage and sacrifice. His unyielding stand in the face of overwhelming odds saved countless lives, leaving a legacy of heroism that will forever inspire those who hear his story. At just 20 years old, Kenneth J. David exemplified the essence of courage and selflessness during his combat actions in Vietnam. Ken couldn't and wouldn't give up, President Biden said in a heartfelt tribute. Instead, he shouted and fired his weapon to attract attention to himself, away from others, away from the wounded men. Imagine that courage. Come get me, don't get those folks. That's selflessness. Ken, I want to say to you, and I wish I could say to every man we're honoring today, you're a hero, a genuine hero, a flat-out, straight-up American hero, and we owe you, the families owe you. After returning from Vietnam, David dedicated his life to serving his fellow veterans. For 39 years, he has worked with disabled American veterans in Ohio, where he now serves as adjutant treasurer. His commitment to helping veterans is unwavering. At our chapter back here, we just spent $3,000 in food for homeless veterans and veterans in need for the Christmas holidays, David shared. We get used scooters and wheelchairs donated to us, and we, in turn, give them out, no charge, to whoever needs them. We do what we have to do to help the veterans in our community, because we have to help our brothers. David's bond with the men he served alongside remains unbreakable. He often reflects on those who didn't return home, calling them his friends, sometimes even his kids. He keeps a book of their biographies in his truck as a way to honor their memory. That's my way of coping with my stress, he explained. They were my friends. A lot of times, I call them kids, because we were all kids at that time. But we knew the way they walked, we knew the way they talked, their heartbeat, and we would do anything for each other in any situation. Already a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross in 1971, David believes the Medal of Honor will amplify his voice as an advocate for veterans. With the cross, I was able to use the award to help more veterans because people listened to me, David said. Now that I'm receiving the Medal of Honor, I will have more power to help more veterans, in my opinion, because I think people will listen to me more because of the award. For David, serving veterans remains his lifelong mission. I will never forget my friends and my veterans in my county up here, he said. That's my goal for the rest of my life now. As President Biden nears the conclusion of his term as Commander-in-Chief, he reflected on the privilege of leading the US military. It's been the greatest honor of my life to lead the world's greatest military, Biden said. They're the finest military in the history of the world. Today we award these individuals a Medal of Honor, but we can't stop here. Together as a nation, it's up to us to give this medal meaning, to keep fighting for one another, for each other, to keep defending everything these heroes fought for, and many of them died for, the ideals of America, the freedom we cherish, the democracy that has made our progress possible. Biden emphasized the uniqueness of the United States, built not on geography, ethnicity, or religion, but on an idea. We are the only nation based on an idea, he said. The idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal and deserve to be treated equally throughout their entire lives. We haven't always lived up to it, but we've never, ever, ever walked away from it. Today we must say clearly, we never, ever, ever will.